Happy holidays, everybody. It's time to drop some mouse content. As an avid competitor, FPS player, shooter of things in the video games, I have a mouse journey because I'm trying to answer that question. What is the perfect mouse for me? As we're all trying to answer that question. It's a tough one, but I wanted to take you on my mouse journey, and I'll probably have a bunch of mouse reviews and stuff coming on the channel in the future, so you can get my perspective based on sort of my preferences and just the stuff that I've noticed in this journey. Because I think that it's fun. I'm doing more aim-centric content, so I feel like it makes sense to do content like this too. So those of you that are familiar with my content, you'll know that I love the Starlight-12 shape, the Cape Town, the Ultralight 2 Cape Town. It's a beautiful shape. But before we get into that, my hand stats in terms of the width from knuckle to the other side of my hand, we've got 10 centimeters, and from the tip of the index finger to the base of the palm, we've got 18 centimeters. So I have small hands. So and I'm a fast sense user, and I'm somebody that comes from Quake, and I like to use my fingertips for a lot of stuff. So with all of that said, what does that mean in terms of how I like to grip? So I tend to have like a looser claw grip. And the reason is because I want to be able to have clearance so I can move the mouse with my fingertips and be able to aim with that. And especially vertically. And I think this is a big difference to TAC shooters, because a lot of TAC shooter players, like, Valorant, Counter-Strike, all this kind of stuff, they generally don't have to think about vertical movements as much as you do in Quake. And because I have a faster sense in Quake 2, it just makes more sense to be able to be like adept with this type of movement, mouse movement. And I enjoy it. It feels it's something I'm used to, and I've always enjoyed it. So that's something I'm looking for. So I don't have this super strict claw grip where I am just locked in. I don't have that access to this vertical aspect as much. And if I have to go vertical, I'm going to use my arm to do that. Now, this is something that I'm building the technique with my training in aim lab and so on. And this is something that we can all do to actually, as we try to train different techniques. So, for example, I'm not used to doing this, I'm used to doing this with the fingertips. So what about training like a slower sensitivities and just really get the arm skill up? And then now I'll have the ability to maybe use different shapes, because I can be like, I'm not as comfortable with this shape. It doesn't give me as much clearance and room to maneuver with my fingertips, but that doesn't matter as much because I know how to use my arm now. So I can unlock some new shapes whilst actually not changing my grip really. So this is something that I think is a really cool thing to talk about. But for my preferences, like I said, the pros of this mouse is the clearance at the top of the mouse and how aggressively it tapers off at the back in the shape. Obviously, the length of the mouse is quite short. Obviously, you guys have likely looked at so many different videos kind of comparing these shapes, and there's some really great websites that do that as well. So I'm not going to drop all the stats on this video. I'll kind of do more of that on future reviews. And so in terms of the negatives of this shape that I've been kind of going back to again and again, it's part of the pros in a sense, because it's the stability. When you have this much room to play with, this much clearance at the top, because the hump is so low and the mid hump is so low and it tapers off so aggressively, it creates this situation where you can kind of lose your stability and consistency fairly easily at times. And so this has been something I've been trying to look to solve in selecting new mice. So I've gone through various shapes over the last 2-3 years, and you can see some of them here. Now, a similar size to the Starlight-12 is this Hati-S. However, the Hati-S has a higher hump, and although it has the same kind of length, which in theory gives it more kind of play as with the fingertips kind of back and forth in my hand, much like I was saying with the Starlight, it just feels a little bit too clunky for me. And there's something about this mouse, this shape, that I don't like, and honestly, it's hard for me to put my finger on it. I think the hump might be a little bit too tall for me, so I make too much contact at the top of my hand, more so than I'm comfortable with. So I'll put that one over there. In terms of other small mice, the MZ1 is a really interesting mouse because, again, you'll have loads of clearance. It's a very flat mouse. It's super flat. It's even more flat than the Starlight-12, and the hump in this one kind of is actually more towards the back of the mouse, and you can actually change the height of the hump when you get these mice. This is the lowest one that you can get, because you can actually detach this back part of the shell, and you can change it to ones that have a higher hump. This is the lowest one, but the main issue for me is that with the way that I grip the mouse, because I use a 1-2-2 grip, where here's the one, the thumb, and then 2 on the top and 2 on the side. My hand kind of like slopes to the right of the mouse. So what ends up happening for me is I get a little bit of discomfort where the rail, the back part of the rail, because this humps up, actually hits my knuckle of my hand. So for me, actually, the way that the hump is in this mouse, it's not perfect for me in terms of comfort. And it does have a bit of a learning curve, but this is a great mouse for fingertip players because you get these grooves. You get these grooves here for the for fingertip placement that just feels like very controlled. And you don't. This is very unusual. Most mice don't have a concave click for you to left and right mouse button for you to be able to kind of aim with, because you can kind of get a lot of control even with your index finger and your ring finger, or rather your index finger and your middle finger, which is, yeah, it's kind of unusual. So it's cool. It's definitely one that's fun to try. Similarly, to solve the stability problem, I tried to use this Pulsar X-lite Wireless Ergo, and this mouse feels really good, and I've done some great stuff with this. But one of the issues is that it's so wide because of the Ergo part of it, that I don't get that cool feeling that I have with the Starlight-12, where I have a lot of control because my fingers are so close to the sensor. Even though this mouse does feel really comfortable and awesome, there's just like that element to it kind of throws me off a little bit in terms of looking for a more perfect mouse. So moving forward, the GPX, it's a mouse I've wanted to love forever, but it's a little bit too long, meaning that I can't get as much play when moving it vertically with my fingertips. And it's a little bit too wide, meaning that I'm unable to get that good control on those lateral movements that feels really nice for me. So I love this mouse, the build quality of it. It's the most popular mouse for pro gamers for a reason. Logitech knocked it out of the park. The build quality is great. It's just a really solid mouse. It doesn't have issues. It's fantastic. And I wanted to be able to use it for forever, but that's kind of why I've been trying to search for a smaller GPX. Another mouse that's more of an experiment on the larger end is the Viper V3 Pro. It's large. It's a large mouse. I love the clicks on it. The clicks feel really, really good on this mouse. But the weird thing about it is the sensor is pretty far forward, as you guys are probably already aware of if you know anything about this mouse. And it's kind of a weird feeling because even though I can kind of like place my grip up a little bit, that becomes kind of uncomfortable for me, because then I start aiming with this mouse in a way that is very unnatural for me. There are some players that do this. Zayu actually aims like this, where instead of having the base of the palm like behind the mouse, Zayu actually has the base of his palm like on the back of the mouse. So that's a very different feeling. And I think with this mouse actually that could actually be a pretty good style, because again it then allows you to place your grip more forward so that it's more centered to the sensor. And for me, in terms of being able to make consistent lateral movements, and with how standard the sensor is to be in the middle of the mouse, kind of in the center of where your grip naturally would fall, it feels like this is just would take a lot of getting used to. And I have played around with it, and it's just generally a little bit too, it fills my hand up a little bit too much. Again, I don't get that play with the fingertips in the way that feels comfortable for me, to be able to rest back into a good grip after I've used my fingertips a lot. It just gets a little bit too unstable. So doesn't solve the stability issue that I'm having. However, I have to say, I just got the Maya today. This will probably be my first mouse review. Really great, weight on this mouse. It's super low, and it feels like a smaller GPX in a way. It's definitely a different shape, but for me, it kind of in that sense of kind of finding that stability that I'm looking for with the GPX. I can't quite get it because this doesn't feel my hand quite as much as the GPX, but it does have a higher hump in the mid part of the mouse than the Starlight-12 does, just high enough that it's not going to actually block the clearance that I get between the top of my hand and the mid hump of the mouse, but it does fill up a little bit more. So I actually do feel more stability because there's not quite as much space. And in terms of the length of the mouse, is actually quite similar to the Starlight-12 as well. So again, I do get that ability to kind of have more space moving it up and down for those vertical movements with fingertip. So this feels pretty awesome so far. I haven't really played with it just yet because I just got it, but it feels awesome. As I said, I'll do more of an in-depth version of a review on this where I'm going to go over, for me, my grip styles and various things like that. You know, various looks at how, you know, my aim training with it, like what I would want to train to maybe do better with this mouse for how I want to play, and like what the reason for that might be. And similarly, you know, what movements I think are easier because of this mouse for me. So you know, I'm not necessarily going to go deep into the technicals and of all the switches and sensors and stuff. There's lots of people that are really good at making that kind of content, but I'm going to kind of, you know, make this more about my experience and also how it relates to aim training and so on. And I think that should be a lot of fun. So hope you guys join me for the journey. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you guys on the next one.